Welcome. It's good to see so many people come here and join us in learning about the Identity-Defined Security Alliance. Get a little bit of information on what Identity-Defined Security is, where we're going with it, and how you can get involved. Even have a little demo here that shows you an example of the work you can do with what the IDSA is outputting. I'm Cumming. I'll be your host today, and my lovely assistant, Brian Vinacco, is here to help out as needed. We'll have a Q&A session afterwards. This is being recorded, so if you have any questions, we'll have a couple people running mics around the room so that we can capture the questions and get them on the recording, if you'd be so kind. So, what motivates us to do what we do? What brings us together as a community of security practitioners, as a community of vendors to try and make people's lives easier, better, safer, more secure, however you want to describe it, is that you can't turn on the news nowadays without hearing about breaches. Breaches are absolutely on the rise. And I had to put that away because that was the wrong thing to hand me. Breaches are absolutely on the rise, and as a community of security practitioners, we're constantly under assault, right? We're the ones that have to deal with the outcome of these breaches. And predominantly what we hear about on the news and as we're moving through our daily lives are the external attacks, the nation states, the advanced persistent threats, the things that are coming from without the enterprise. And when we look at those things, we see that a large contributing factor to the predominance of these breaches is that we've got weak passwords to blame. And it's easy to look at this and say, okay, we have to address passwords, we got to do multi-factor authentication, but really that only addresses a part of what the real problem is. Because the attacks aren't just coming from outside of the organization. I read a Ponemon study that was said 59% of individuals who are leaving an organization walked away with some sort of critical data. Whether that was malicious intent, whether it was just didn't know I had it on a USB drive, 59% of people walk away from a job with data they should not have. Okay, so how do we address these? And when we start to talk about malice of forethought with respect to these data breaches, it may not be huge numbers, but these are the types of breaches that can adversely impact a brand. Right? These are things that can erode the trust in your organization. And this threat is real. So what we've endeavored to do by coming together as a group of partners is to address business problems, to be able to look at the identities, because as many people have said in other presentations, identity is a new perimeter. However you want to describe it, identities are vulnerable. End users, relying solely on passwords are vulnerable because you cannot keep complex multiple passwords in your head and not have some sort of repetition. Everybody jokes about the note under the keyboard, saying, oh, these are my passwords. The little book, accounts, passwords written down. Getting to a point where you have control over the passwords and the user experience allows you to get to a point where maybe you de-emphasize or eliminate the password altogether, right? And when it comes to insiders, you have to think about, yes, user experience is important, single sign-on, very important, but also what information do they have access to? How are they using that information? How are we controlling that, right? how are we even reporting on that if we can't control that? So no one solution on its own can come into an organization and say, we're going to do this. And we're going to solve all your security problems, click button install, integrate with your user directory, and you're ready to go. What we've brought together with the IDSA is an effort to unite multiple disparate solutions with standard integration patterns to allow them to operate as a single solution, right? Supporting the vision that we have that people should be able to work seamlessly from anywhere, right? BYOD is a huge headache in organizations, regardless. But if you don't have control over identities, you don't have control over who has access to what, and reporting on that, and what the risk to the organization is, you're not going to be able to develop an effective solution. You're going to make yourself more vulnerable to breaches. And I don't know anyone out there who has just one single application that they use for business purposes, right? Oftentimes you run your business on multiple applications. We've got our HR app, we've got our SAP, Oracle e-business, whatever it may be, you've got all these multiple apps that run your business that your users have to interact with and you have to be able to manage the experience with. So enhancing security with a group of solutions that are best of breed takes the integration work out of your hands. There's always been the argument suite versus best of breed, and the best of breed argument's always been, well, then you have to be the integrator. But if we can pull together a set of standard use case profiles and integrations, then you no longer have to be the integrator. All you have to do is look at a set of critical capabilities when you're choosing your solutions and evaluate that against a framework that can describe how these different pieces and parts interact with identity and how identity can actually augment these solutions and make them better and more powerful. On its own, a SIM is a great tool for aggregating information. If you don't have a handle on identity or good representation of identity, if you don't have the ability to tie individual accesses back to a single person, you can tell what happened, but you can't get down to who did it, how did it happen, how did we get compromised in this way, right? So within the IDSA, we've developed a set of use cases to start with. These are up and available on the IDSA website. You can comment on these. The idea is to build a community of practitioners who are contributing to this effort and helping to make these things better and more relevant. Right? If we sit alone in a room and develop use cases, sure, they can be valuable to one or two organizations, but if we get a community of practitioners commenting on them, making them better, helping us evolve this, then we can have a solution that is equally applicable across multiple industries and verticals and individual customers. So what we have endeavored to do is build a sample solution from these defined use cases to show you what's possible with standard integration patterns. By no means is this going to be equally applicable across every organization here, but this is meant just to be an example of how we pulled together these use cases to come up with a solution to address a problem, and how you can use these integrations and use case patterns to build solutions on your own, all without having to do endless amounts of integration work yourselves, right? Because the output of this effort is documentation on how you can do this and how it can be repeatable without you having to expend the energy that the people who did this for the first time are doing. Uh-oh. Come on. There we go, nice glitch. Sorry about that. So what we've pulled together is a set of solutions from these areas. You'll notice it's not comprehensive. It's what we had to work with and what we could pull together in the time. But this represents our attempt to take multiple integration patterns and build a solution out of it. And we engaged the assistance of a number of vendors to perform various tasks within this infrastructure. You'll see a logo here, there, as we go through, but the idea being that as we go through this, if you already have something in that place and it fills the requirements of the individual use case that we've defined in the IDSA, that any solution should be applicable here. What we won't have is the pre-done work that documents how that solution fits in until that specific vendor would choose to participate in here. But for all those who have chosen to participate, we have figured out how this works together, how this can come together to deliver this solution, and done the footwork for you so that you don't endlessly have to do this yourself. So what we've chosen to address is the insider threat. We've got two actors in this. One is going to be our bad actor, one of the 59% of employees who tries to take off with certain information from the employer. In this case, they have malicious intent. And then we've got a manager who is tasked with responding to this incident, right? And this was just our best effort at coming up with something that was demonstratable. So one last plug before we jump into the demonstration is that I encourage you to go to the website, look at what we've done, comment on use cases, stop by the booth of any of the vendors that's part of the IDSA. You should have they do have little cards in front of their booths, right? So they can, if you need, just look for this logo and they can direct you to the website or any further information or assistance you need. So that being said, we're going to quickly jump into our demonstration. Go. Oh, that's handy. Apologies. All right. So I'm an employee. I come in, sign into my workspace in the morning and complain about network latency and the fact that it takes me forever to log into my desktop. But once I'm in, then what I'm going to do, just to demonstrate here, is I'm going to log into our SSO portal. And within this SSO portal, we have all of our corporate application. Enter. And because we've made an investment in doing this, we put two-factor authentication in front of it, and I've got my app up. So as I sign in, I should be prompted and use Touch ID to move forward. Okay, standard user experience, username, password, second factor, right? And now I'm in, and since I'm in, we're going to extend this. I've got access to the applications that I have. I can launch and jump into Salesforce, look at my calendar for the day, my task list, customer information, whatever it may be, without having to re-enter username, password. So as part of my job, I've got privileged access to a system, and I log into the privileged access system to retrieve that password. And behind the scenes, then our second factor, and we've got another SAML integrated login into one of our critical apps. So in this case, I go to, where's my, hang on, there it is. Changed order on me. I go in and I've got to provide a justification for why I need this. And I can sign out without any further interrogation. I get access to my password. And by no means is this the only way that this flow has to go, right? You can choose to not disclose the password. You can choose to automatically launch the desktop for the user, but in this case, we have the password that is supplied and the login that's done. So I've got access to our super secret system, and normally you'd be able to classify data and put controls in place to stop the outflow of data from your organization, but the thing is, we still can't stop a screenshot, right? And being able to do that. So I take the screenshot and then decide that I'm going to do something bad with it, right? Up to this point, I've done nothing out of the ordinary, done nothing wrong, nothing that has been overtly detectable by the system, right? And we can look at information in the system and see that the user and their risk score, at this point, the identity risk is low. We've got a number of systems evaluating risk on the back end, and what they've come back with is, as an aggregate, my risk is low. We have not detected anything that the user's done. We've not subverted any rules that have been in place, and we now have an aggregated risk that's considered low because I've done the same things I've done every day when I've logged in. Except for, we'll come and we want to upload our information to WikiLeaks, right? For some reason, we've decided that we're not happy with the way things are going and that we're going to do something that's less than above board. And what you should have noticed is that a number of things have happened while this page was loading, is that the system has detected that something bad has happened. I no longer have access to the remote desktop. I've been placed into an extreme risk group, and my access has been cut off. Okay? Now, at this point, we can surface the information in a number of ways, depending on the infrastructure that you have. Remember, we're talking about a framework here, so all of these different pieces that are detecting risk can work together to pull together an aggregate. So if I want to look at how my aggregate user risk is, right, I can surface it in a dashboard, in a SIM, and wherever, and I can see that now Cody Grant, our bad actor, has been placed in a position of extreme risk, right? So our first point of investigation can be right here and say something happened, elevated the risk, and kicked our system into gear, and we had to now address it, right? And by sharing information and by having the identity tied to these actions, then we can be reasonably sure that as we drill down, we can find out who did what, and if we have put the proper pieces in place, right? For example, as you're going through the privileged sessions, you can do session recording. For critical systems, it's kind of a no-brainer. But you can go back and replay that and say exactly what happened with this session, right? Where did things go wrong? Was there a misuse of access that they had? So we've got our, what is it? Cole. We have our manager who, by whatever means that you choose, has been notified that something has to be done, right? Email, text, if you got it, pager, right? There may still be a few of those around. But our manager decides to go in and, what's it? Oh, LS colon? Sorry for the typo. So in this user experience, we have a completely different flow, right? We've got the password de-emphasized. We've got the user still subject to two-factor authentication, but we've got additional components that are evaluating risk on the back end that have said, in this case, since the password is the most vulnerable piece of the equation, that we have a high level of confidence that as this goes right now, if we have this user supply just a second factor, that's going to be enough for us. And in this case, the user actually has to pay attention to what they're doing and put what's on the screen, which makes it a lot less vulnerable to an attack where you're just trying and over and over and over again until you get somebody who just finally says, oh, click, right? But this is another key component in usability, is that you own that user experience from the login on down. You can define what that is for you and make it as convenient as possible without sacrificing security as you go, right? So as we come in here, we've got the manager been notified that there is something wrong with their employee that they have to address. And you can see that right now I've got an access review that I have to deal with. And if I drill down into this individual user's access, I can see that the accounts this user had have been disabled as a precautionary measure while we undergo the investigation. So the response type that you choose to initiate as a result of these conditions being met is entirely up to you. You can choose, if it's bad enough, to just completely shut down access. You can suspend. You can take away just the privileged access. Whatever it is that you choose to do is entirely up to you, and it's subject to whatever policies, procedures that you have in your organization. So now that I've got an access review, I can see that as part of the investigation into this, if there was true malicious intent, I could go and revoke access for this user at this time completely, right? If they're walked out the door, we could make sure that this is a complete disablement and that there's not a chance that this user has to have access again. It's entirely up to the way that you choose to build your response. But again, using these standard integration patterns, we can give you the ability to control what this process will look like based on your own individual organizations. So the user actually has to go in here, make their choices, and submit this. And this would be, again, another piece of the investigation. Operationally, you'd be using whatever is feeding your SOC and having those guys go in, do the forensics, whatever your organization has chosen to do. But in this instance, we've decided we're going to do an access review, and that's as far as the user's manager has to go in this. So I can choose, since this is a demo and I do have to reset it to be able to do again, I can choose to give the access back, and then the user will be re-enabled. So you have the option to say, well, this wasn't really a malicious act. After further investigation, we want to be able to give them their access back.
Where could you see what he's done then? Because I didn't see what he did.
Well, this was just a demonstration. There are ways that we could see what he did. There would be logs of him going to that website, because that was what, in fact, triggered all of our actions to occur, right? In the real world, you're not going to have a URL that you know your user's going to go to and that you can trigger a rule off of, but you can put the same kind of mechanics in space where you can provide those types of information. So one other critical piece of this that we were missing in this environment is a SIM. So we've got really nothing that is aggregating all that information where we could very easily show you that type of view into what actually happened. So that, in a nutshell, is the demonstration that we have as an example of how you can use these integration patterns to come up with a solution. So Brian and Julie have got microphones if there are any questions, so we can capture them on the recording. Would you be kind enough to hold them until we get there with the mic?
Is it on? Oh, yep.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just a clarification question on the use case that we were just showing for the certification. So we're assuming that all of the investigation, our SIM, we've reviewed the logs, we've talked to the person, we've done all kinds of HR things, and then we would actually go and execute that access review. Is that correct?
Yes. So we're assuming here that the last step in removing access completely is for the manager to say, as a subject of this investigation, you no longer have access, you no longer should have access. Ideally, you could automate that once the HR system kicked in and did its thing, but in the event of a malicious act, you kind of want to move things along maybe in advance of what HR has done.
So perhaps the access review is really in the event that they're cleared and we want to give them the access back would be an easy way to do that, as opposed to just processing their termination through the aggregation of the HR data, or processing like an emergency termination kind of workflow.
Yeah, so you'll notice that our automated action was to remove all of their access, disable their accounts, and stop them from being able to proceed any further. Under normal circumstances, that's a pretty harsh thing to do before you've done an investigation, but you don't have to do that completely, right? You can take away partial access as you go. Run, Julie, run.
Okay, I was actually looking at the design of the system and was just thinking here for a little bit. So you have your single sign-on implemented, and on top of that you have the second factor authentication. And I'm just thinking, so having the single sign-on, it's actually preventing you from having multiple passwords for different systems. Say, for example, you have 25 systems. So you have one set of credentials to log into all those systems. Now, say, for example, I'm a hacker, right? And I, for example, compromise your account. And for some reason, I figure out a way of bypassing the two-factor authentication. So if I'm able to get into the system, I will be able to get into all the 25 system as well.
Mhm.
So, even though single sign-on and two-factor authentication seems to be convenient and secure, how would we actually address that? Because in this case, if we had 25 sets of credentials, if I compromise one of the system, I only compromise one of them. But with a single sign-on, if I compromise your account, in that case, I compromise all the system, all the 25 of them. So how do we actually address that?
And this really becomes a space where the vendors can distinguish themselves in that space, right? Because there are vendors out there that claim their credentials cannot be compromised and back it up with an insurance policy, basically, right? So, yes, all systems are not created equally. Yes, two-factor gets you only so far, but in that event, I've compromised the system for one user, not multiple users, where if I don't have a system like that in place, you open yourself up to just plain old brute force attacks against these systems, in which case I'm very likely to find something where I can elevate privilege and move throughout the organization. It's really only through the combination of all of these working together, evaluating user risk at the actions they're taking, that we can really get to a point where we can say, okay, we're pretty confident that we've built a good system or a good solution. Is anything ever going to be 100%? Absolutely not. Yes.
Yes, I just want to confirm a couple key capabilities that exist in your integration pattern, but I don't think I see that in the demo. One is the risk engine. You mentioned
Yep.
about UABA risk, the fraud risk, the same risk. So I'm assuming
Yep.
there is a risk engine aggregates all kinds of risk
Yep.
from different sources. Okay. Then you have a rule engine, I believe, which specifies what remediation action to take based on this aggregate risks.
Mhm.
Is that right? Just want
Yep.
to confirm. Okay.
Well, in this case, it was a bit contrived, right?
Okay.
In a production, real-world deployment of this, yes, you would be able to have all of that going on. Because we needed things to happen at the click of a mouse, we had a specific rule we set
Okay.
that said, if this happens, unleash the hounds, right? So in a real-world deployment of this, it would be much less contrived. The rules would be less concrete because you wouldn't know specifically where somebody was going to go to do something nefarious. So you would have to have broad-reaching rules to say, by default, we're going to block this activity, and then based on business need or investigation, we can open that up here and there. But again, this is meant to be an example of how you can use the use cases to pull together. And, we came as close to non-contrived as we absolutely could, but still being able to be demoable.
So any vendor joining this alliance group that, very good at those sophisticated rule management? Is there
So
any?
that's it. The alliance is open,
Okay.
right? It's not that you have to jump through endless hoops to get in. You just have to say, we'd like to be a part of it, sign the charter, and then really the onus is upon you to participate,
Okay.
right?
Cool. Thank you.
Ian, can you highlight the members that were participating in the demo?
This?
Yeah, can you just kind of talk through?
Yeah, and Ian, now that you have this up, thank you. So SecureAuth as an example, and anyone who is like SecureAuth, and if anybody's here, correct me, they have a means to determine if a phone's been ported. So the first question, how do you know if the multi-factor is working, if a hacker is very good, takes control of the phone? SecureAuth talks
Right.
about the ability to see has a phone been ported. The second question about behavioral analytics, in this one it's Exabeam, and Exabeam should have supervised machine learning modules to detect something like DNS attacks, domain generating algorithms, right? So it's going to go out, the user is going to be well, maybe the machine, maybe not the user, the machine may be going out and looking for a DNS, a command and control. So this, Netscope as the CASB and any of the other CASBs like Netscope, what are they trying to upload? Are they trying to upload to the WikiLeaks? Or are they trying to upload to an unsanctioned app? Not as nefarious as WikiLeaks, but something like that. So, you know, and then SailPoint here as the governance around it. So it ties into, well, what are your policies? What constitutes a violation of the policy? So you look at all the different players here. I mean, you could talk about every single one of them and what they do very well and how they work together. I won't put in a plug for Optiv. I'll let you do that, Ian.
I'm going to plug the IDSA, right? Because this is ultimately going to be driven by the membership, by clients, by those that choose to get involved. So the way that you make things better for yourself, for everybody else, is to be involved in what this is doing. And if you have a favorite vendor that fits the bill in the framework and you would like to participate, absolutely ask them to participate. They can comment on the use cases that are out there already. They can choose to come in and be more involved and be part of demonstration environment 2.0. But this is ultimately going to grow and get better by the participation of the members. And we do have certain clients right now who have signed up for an advisory board role with the organization so that we can get that level of input as well as from a technologist perspective, right? So vet these use cases against real world requirements.
So I think the point that everyone's getting at right now is your demonstration was beautiful, very nicely executed.
Thank you.
It looked very complex. We're all IAM professionals in one degree or another, but in order to accomplish that, it looks like you need to do a lot of different API calls, a lot of manual configurations in order to make all the systems talk. Am I correct in that?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, there was, due to vendor-specific technology alliances, there was capability there. In some cases, we actually needed third-party integration packages, such as the one that was announced today, the Ping Netscope.
Right. So personally for me, the things that I would love to be able to see, and I don't know if you can do that as part of your demo, is see where that policy is defined that says if you go to that website, they will get flagged. Now, was that Exabeam that you said would do that, or was that?
It could be a number of places, right?
Okay.
We did what was most expedient for us, which may not be the best way to do it, right? The best part about having multiple products monitoring risk as we went through the thing is that we could trigger off of any of those that detected that a policy was breached, that the risk was too high, or whatever it may have been, right? So there's not that for that specific rule that triggered that, where it was defined was actually really important. It was that it was defined, right? We could have actually chosen enforcement from a number of different places, or detection from a number of different places.
Right. But that would all involve detailed knowledge of each of the different products and the API calls and individual components of each of those to make them all work together, right? So there's no centralized solution for this, in other words.
So that's the point, though, in all of this, right? So it's completely unexpected for one vendor to have every single capability listed. Go back to the circular slide. So just forgetting who the vendors are, again, I represent one of them on the screen, but that part is irrelevant to this conversation. There's not one vendor ever going to provide best of breed possible feature function in every one of those boxes inside the circle. So yes, it involves APIs. I mean, by show of hands that are customers in the room, how many have spent money on at least one or more investments in that circle? Don't you want them to talk together so that you get more out of that investment? Whether it takes APIs, whether it takes data calls, whether it uses a web service, to me that's the bits and bytes that an engineer has to work out, but you as a business and you as an organization get the byproduct value of finally having your cybersecurity portfolio be bidirectional. And that's what we don't have today. Ping is great in one area, SecureAuth is great in one area, Exabeam is great in one area, but imagine the three of them together with CryptZone, with SailPoint, with Exabeam all working in concert, and that's how we drive down breaches.
Yeah. And just further to that, that an output of going down this road with the multiple vendors that participated in this and in the alliance is that you're not going to have to figure out how to do all that. That's part of what we're doing right now and documenting right now. So there will be documentation for this. There will be a refining of this as we move forward so that, yeah, it may take API calls, but it's going to be follow a script and you're there as opposed to trying to figure it out yourself.
My name is Tina Gravel. I'm with CryptZone, now a Sixtera business. First of all, I want to thank you for including us as part of this. I wanted to be involved with it for a year, and it just kind of took a while for us to get into it. But I think you're providing a really valuable service. I can't tell you the number of CISOs I've met with that have said to me, I have this, I have that, I have this, and what do I do with them all, and how do I get them to work? And it's just a really confused marketplace right now, so that the more that the vendors can work together to provide a solution, I think the better it's going to be. Now, with that said, there are a lot of people here that have done a lot of work to work together. And, you know, I got to thank Ping and Optiv, because if they hadn't started this, none of us would be doing it. So anyway, and thanks to everybody coming. It's only through us doing these things that we're going to lessen the confusion of our market and our buyers and customers and trusted people that we work with. And until we do that, we're all going to be in situations where they are confused and they don't do anything because they're so confused. And that's just not acceptable, given the breaches that you talked about. Thank you.
Any other questions? We got a little bit more time here on the clock. No questions? Well, thank you so much for coming out and listening to us and working with us on this. And please go to the website, get involved. If you have any questions, you know, all around the expo there are vendors with the IDSA logo who can help you get more information and direct you to where you can get assistance. And thank you.